Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Let's now turn to our second guest, Dr. Abiodun Adeniyi, who is a public affairs analyst from our Arise Abuja studio. He now joins us to preview this Saturday's election on a state-by-state basis. We'll also be speaking on voter turnout and whether the postponement of the polls is likely to cause apathy or energize the base of the two leading presidential candidates, amongst other issues. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Abiodun Adeniyi.
My pleasure, Ima. Thanks for having me on. Good morning, viewers.
Yes. Let's just start with this directive or instruction by the president, the shoot-on-sight order. Will that scare voters away from the polling stations, or it will make more people to come because they are short of security?
Well, Ima, I think the first observation I want to make with respect to these is that we need to understand that many of our politicians, many of our public leaders, have limitations with public communication. Okay, sometimes the fact that they are politicians, the fact that they've been elected, does not mean that anytime they speak, they are actually going to be logical, legally, morally, and at the level of social responsibility. The directive by the president, of course, we know that it falls really short of the ideal in public communication. It can hardly stand any logic, any legal logic, cannot hardly be classed as responsible. And if you ask the president again, if you give him another opportunity, I really doubt if he is going to repeat, if he's going to make that kind of statement. Sometimes our public officials talk without understanding the consequences of their action, without understanding or appreciating what they are saying actually means. And I think what the president said can actually be seen in that regard. So it might be a lesson for us in the future that perhaps, our officials, our politicians, our leaders should be exposed to some minimum level of tutorials in terms of what to say and what not to say and how to say it, especially when you are in a very serious, very high position of responsibility, in a situation where your utterances can decide policy directions, in a situation where your utterances can affect the lives of people. Now, having said that, Ima, it's also important to say that, yes, the elections are coming, the president has made a directive. I don't see how that is going to affect voter turnout, really. Rather, it's going to be a motivation because the average Nigerian citizen understands that we are in a festive period. We are marking our own democratic festival, as it were, because that's what election entails. And the average conscientious citizen will definitely want to exercise his or her franchise. So I see a voter turnout that will be higher than expected. What happened last week was a disappointment. What happened last week was disheartening, but we are also gratified, we are also heartened that INEC has moved on from there and they are very ready for the election, as it were. Up to yesterday, they've kept assuring us. This afternoon, too, we're expecting further assurances. So we hope that, my expectation really is that nothing will affect turnout this weekend, and that we're going to have the proverbial free, fair, and credible elections. That is my expectation, really, because everything, all the pieces in the jigsaw have been above average. And rather than last week's disappointment affecting them, affecting the voters, that is, to work in the positive, because people's consciousness have now been awoken. We know that something has happened, and there's going to be a counter-reaction in the positive. That's my prediction, really. Yeah, Ima.
Well, you said that the president, if given the opportunity, would change or will retract that statement. He made that statement on Monday, and since then, we've seen the president's handlers, reaffirm that statement. From the spokesperson to the president, to the FEC yesterday, to the military, reaffirming the statement by the president. So one really doubts if the president will retract that statement. But my question to you, I mean, we are witnessing accusations and counter-accusations by the two major players in these elections. They have made scathing remarks about the electoral umpire. What sort of impact and consequences do these accusations and counter-accusations have on the rescheduled polls and the credibility of INEC?
Very well, Adesua. I need us to also understand that sometimes when the #1 citizen, with all his retinue of aides, in all his glory, most of the time, his aides will always stand by him, whether rightly or wrongly. And in this situation, wrongly. They're standing by him. Maybe it could be out of sycophancy or out of a demonstration of some levels of loyalty, but I doubt if any sane public official will go ahead and implement that kind of order. It is very tough, and tougher still in our kind of climb, for the president of a country to retract that kind of statement or to come and publicly apologize. We understand that it's a matter of ego, but I really doubt that if you give him the opportunity, that he will make that kind of statement again. Well, that's a conjecture, but that's a reasonable one, my own sense, as it could be. And to your question really on the tension, the hitting of the politics by the contenders, we expect this to happen. That is the nature of any political process. We see it all around the world. It's just the levels that matter. Our own level is probably thicker because we are still at some, we are still below average in terms of political sophistication. So there are anxieties, there are fears, there are worries. But even at that, you will agree again that what we're having at the moment is not as serious, it's not as dense as it was in 2015. Neither could we say it is as serious as it was in 2011. We are moving on really at the level of peace, at the level of credibility, at the level of transparency, because the world is increasingly becoming decentered, the world is borderless, the world is planetary, and we are being watched all over the world. So public officials, agencies, and government officials are very careful, and they are trying their best, as it seems anyway, to make sure that they are salutary, to make sure that they come up with something much more productive, something that people will comment. So yes, the politicians will hit the polity. They will make a lot of noise. They will accuse and counter-accuse each other. Oh, this is something that could be said to be natural in a build-up to a major election, like a presidential election, that is. But the only thing is that if it is not violent, if all these things, if it doesn't turn into violence, okay, if there are no serious crises, I think it's part of a political process, and most importantly, it's part of the build-up to a presidential or any election for that matter. Like I said earlier, in the United States of America, we see these things in different shapes and sizes. We see how rambunctious their own process can be. In the UK as well, we see it. But of course, we see that these ones are much more developed than ourselves.
Yeah, but Dr.
At our own level too.
But Dr. Adeniyi, my question really wasn't about the accusations they are making about themselves. It's the accusations about the electoral umpire, INEC, and that's why I asked, what are the consequences for the credibility of the elections by this umpire, where you have the scathing remarks made about the umpire? Because they are both alleging collusion, they are both alleging rigging. Does it not have consequences on the credibility that Nigerians are looking forward to by that same umpire?
Yes, Adesua, I think I read somewhere on Twitter what the INEC chairman said, that sometimes they become very uncomfortable if they are being accused by one political party. But when they have the other political party and more political parties accusing them, then they become very comfortable, believing that they are probably doing something that is right. It is actually the lot of an empire to be accused anywhere in the world, and in any situation. Even referees sometimes get accused, for making decisions that the other opponent may not find fine, may not find okay. You know, so it's a natural thing, and it's even much more natural, much more realistic to expect it in a political game like our own. You know, INEC will continue to get accused. INEC will continue to get badgered by different sections, different political interest groups. But the onus is on them really is to stand firm and face the ball, you know, and not take their eyes off it, because if they do, you know, then they are not what the position of an empire really. But let me tell you, if they are focused, you know, if they are consistent, you know, if they are determined and are not overwhelmed by these accusations, you know, I mean, we'll see through these things at the end of the day. Don't forget, it is not only the political parties that are observing this process. Okay, international observers and national observers are also around. The civil society is also there. The media is also there. We are all of us are also watching. So the political parties can accuse them. They can make any kind of judgments on them. But there are also other stakeholders, okay, whose judgments are also very, very important. You know, so it is not for them to cow, you know, or to bow to the precious tactics of political parties and allow that to affect their determination or their performance in their output eventually.
Dr. Adeniyi,
yeah.
Let's take a look. Let's review the 6 geopolitical zones, state by state, and let's have your predictions. I want to start off with the zone with the highest number of registered voters, the Northwest, which actually has about the same number of registered voters as the Northeast and Southeast put together. It's also not so much an APC stronghold as a President Buhari stronghold. Will the landslide of 2015 come to play in these elections? And let's start with Kano State.
All right, Tunu. I think you were getting into something I would call a specific, which is usually the fault of partisan politicians, you know. But I agree that I want to see your question as a test, and I will make some reasonable attempt, really, because I've been a political correspondent myself in the Guardian newspapers, and sometimes we make some of these reasonable projections. Against that background, I would say as follows, you know. One, the Northwest is one of the most populated in terms of number of registered voters. They are very active, they're very conscious politically, and they are usually very, very enthusiastic. Kano particularly. Okay, it's always been a place that President Muhammadu Buhari has been winning, and if you ask the average APC partisan, he will tell you President Muhammadu Buhari will repeat that feat again. But again, if you ask a PDP participant, he will tell you it's not going to be the case because we have some prominent politicians from that area moving away from the APC. I mean, mentions have been made of, I think it's Kwankwanso, you know, and some other big wigs moving away from the place. So it might likely affect the fortune of the president in the Northeast and coming down to Katsina and other states in the Northwest as well. But having said that, really, I see some losses and I see some gains on both sides, you know. But realistically, if you ask me, really, I know that's what you're doing. I beg your pardon for repeating that again. It's going to be tough for the president to win as massively as he used to do in those areas. You know, Atiku will have a good showing in that area, but the president will still carry the day.
But let's go through the states. Let's go. We've talked about Kano, Kaduna, Katsina, Kebbi State, Jigawa, Sokoto, Zamfara. Yeah. Do you predict an upset? Do you see Atiku and PDP capturing any one of those states in the Northwest?
No, I don't see, I won't say, I don't see an upset really. It's going to be close. You know, at the end of the day, it might be too close to call. I saw some prediction this morning saying that overall we might even have a runoff. Okay, somebody is going to have an edge, and going by his past performances in that area, I will give it to Buhari, but I think Atiku will spring some surprises in that area as well. Yeah.
All right, permit me to actually borrow a leaf from my colleague here, Tundu, and actually let's still pry further and actually get into probably North Central. Some of the states in the North Central have actually witnessed heavy attacks in recent times, and even in the past, talking about states like Benue State, Plateau State, all right, and what do you think? Do you think this will actually shape how things will play out for the president in those states? All right, also including the political turmoils that we've seen both in Kogi State and Kwara State. How do you think all this would actually shape out and play out for the president?
Yes, Aaron, very well. That's another good test for me. But first of all, before I respond in specific terms, I need us to understand that there's an understanding of politics that it is not always okay to assume that the average person, the average participant, the average voter is rational. We assume that they are rational, but there's a lot of irrationality, with every due respect, in the way voters, electorates, and the populace can behave sometimes. It might surprise you that some of these conditions, some of these preconditions that we think might make voters to vote in one particular way may not actually happen at the end of the day. That's why we say politics can be fluid. You know, it can be very watery and unpredictable. You know, yes, we have seen some conditions in North Central. We have seen some situations. At the end of the day, it might end up not affecting the fortune of any of the aspirants. But again, like we did in the case of the Northwest, there have been gains and losses in terms of personalities that have moved from one place to the other. You know, I believe Kwara State, for instance, is in the North Central, and we know who is in command of Kwara State. He was formerly in APC, now he's back in PDP. I would expect that to play some very good, to play out, to show in the result at the end of the day. And of course, Benue State, the governor, formerly in APC, now in PDP, we cannot take that for granted. That's not going to affect the outcome of the result. And of course, there are some other states around, you know, that people might vote on the basis of performance or non-performance. You know, but yes, the North Central, I think, was won by President Buhari in 2015. It's going to be dicey this time around. You know, if it's going to be dicey and it's going to be tough for him to repeat the feats he produced in 2015. You know, but whether or not some of these crises, some of this violence, some of these killings in the area will affect the outcome of the result, you know, is something that I doubt. You know, because the voters sometimes think differently from what some other kind of projections will stipulate. Yes, Aaron.
Okay, Dr. Adeniyi, let me take you to the Northeast so that we just complete the northern zones. Now, the Northeast, where the insurgency has made has a lot to play in the calculations. How the president has dealt with the insurgency in the last 3.5 years. But that is the zone of the main opposition candidate, Atiku Abubakar. That zone has not produced the president since Tafawa Balewa, Borno, Adamawa, Bauchi, and the other states in the zone. What is your take?
Well, the Northeast is a very tricky situation, you know, but before I come to a specific, we need to also understand that there's a general, we can actually do a general appreciation of what the situation is. The insurgency did not start today. It started about 9-10 years ago, you know, in another administration. Buhari inherited it. You know, he came. Anyway, one of his campaign promises was to actually bring it to an end. But, of course, their opinion that he has underperformed in that area. You know, but let's not forget the factor of occultic support. You know, a situation where people are blinded to reason. Once they believe in you, they just go headlong and discountenancing any other kind of distractions at the level of counter-reason, if you want. You know, Buhari has been said to enjoy that kind of support in the past, and it might be difficult for us to just wish it away in the case of the Northeast. You know, but having said that as well, Atiku is a very powerful person. He's a very influential citizen of the Northeast, and he has done very well in Adamawa, one of the best private universities in the country. He has it, he established it, and apart from government in that area, you know, he is the greatest employer of labor. That is also going to be a factor. But we need to also quickly remember that the governor of his state, who he supported 2015, is on the other side. So you can see pluses and minuses, okay? But in specific terms, really, who will win the Northeast? Tough, again. 50-50.
What a call. Now let's come to the Southwest, Lagos State. Although we do not have the numbers of people who have collected their PVCs, but we do know that Lagos has the highest registered voters for this election. It is regarded as a battleground. We have Ogun, neighboring Ogun State, where it's an APC-controlled state, but just last week we saw the president and his team pelted on live television. We know the PDP also have fraction going on in that state. In Osun State, there's a disquiet over former Governor Aregbesol's tenure. Have the people recovered from that? And then we also know that the Adeleke family are very influential, and a contentious elections held there recently that is still in court. We also, in Lagos, let me not also forget that we have large non-indigenous population. How would all of this play out, and who are you calling it for?
Yeah, Adesiwa, thanks a lot. You do know, something interests me about the politics of Lagos. They are recorded as having a high number of registered voters, just like Kano. But it's interesting to see that we have more voters coming out in Kano than they do in Lagos. You know, it could be maybe because Lagos is much more, like you said, cosmopolitan, a metropolitan city with different people, different cultures, coming up together in the place. So they are a bit apathetic when it comes to voting. I don't know. But as it were, anyway, we still have some people coming out to vote in a place like Lagos, you know, with all the population. We're likely to see some very interesting results coming from Lagos and extending to the Southwest, you know. But I've also listened to the prognosis of PDP and APC partisans, very interesting prognosis that is. And it is safe to say that, you know, for the APC, they have stalwarts, chieftains, you know, like Asiwaju Bola Tinubu, and the rest of them. And it's going to be dangerous for any opponents, any opposition to undermine the powers of a person like that, you know. And don't forget that the vice president is also from that area, okay? But having said that, you know, the PDP will also be gratified that the people of the Southwest are reputedly exposed people who could vote sometimes against the grain. You know, I remember in between Obasanjo and Fala, they never voted for Obasanjo, for instance. You know, they don't care sometimes. They just make up their mind and do whatever they want to do. So the Atiku camp might benefit from these. And like you said again, it's a place that is cosmopolitan. We have others, citizens from other ethnic groups populating Lagos. So their role, their factor will also be very important for us to consider. But overall, Lagos or Southwest, if you ask me, I would say 60-40 for APC.
Now let's go to the Southeast. What the Southeast lacks in numbers, they more than make up for in attitude. The Southeast is extremely energized from the grassroots all the way to the diaspora, and they're ready to come out in their numbers. And also the fact that the Southeast are widely, well, indigents of the Southeast are widely dispersed all over the country. How do you see the Southeast going this time? Also bearing in mind the statements from the leader of IPOB, Nnamdi Kanu, what could be the significance of that? Does Buhari stand a chance now of breaking PDP's traditional stronghold?
Yes, Tudu. I think there's something that is peculiar to the Southeast, and that is that since the 1960s, they haven't been lucky to be at the center of presidential politics. They haven't been president. And I think it is time that we begin to look at this, because if we want to give them a good sense of belonging, beyond the sense of longing that they ordinarily have, it is time the political class, the political groups begin to think of them as people who should mount the saddle once again since Aguiyi Ironsi as president of this country. But there's something about politicians. There's a way they play their game. We cannot really be absolute on this score, but it's just a modest recommendation, from an observer, that it is time they're given the opportunity, to become the president of this country at some point, But having said that, really, the yearning of the Southwest to actually lead this country sometimes influence, sometimes condition their voting pattern. And they can also be very conscientious. They can also make up their mind and stick to it without caring whose ox is God. I don't see them going away from PDP this time. And don't forget that Atiku has Obi from the Southeast as a vice presidential candidate. So suddenly I think PDP will carry the day in the Southeast. So if you ask me in mathematical terms or in statistical terms, I would say 80-20 PDP.
Okay, Dr. Adeniyi, let me take you to the South-South zone, the goose that lays the golden egg, and of course, where the oil comes from. A big prize for any party that wants to win the presidential election. President Buhari has not did not fare well in the South-South states. Now, looking at what has happened in recent times, Akpabio, an uncommon defection, he calls it, from the PDP to the APC. Look at Cross River, where you have people like Ndoma Egba. And of course, Rivers, which is a key state, despite the fact that Rotimi Amaechi has bungled most of course, they are not presenting candidates in all other office. Presidential election is the only place. But Amaechi is still bent on making a statement that he is a leader in that state. Then if you move over to Delta, where the Ogboro factor has moved to the APC with an Udwanga, former governor, also defecting to the APC. Do you think President Buhari will make any impact in the South-South?
Very well, Ima. Like you said, the South is very critical to the survival of this country, because it's they play a major role in the production of our revenue, in the generation of our revenue. Nobody can undermine that region, in calculations, And it's important to say as well that President Jonathan comes from there, and President Jonathan remains a hero in the understanding of the evolution of Nigerian democracy by his singular action in 2015, where he congratulated the winner even before the results were released. What that action of his, irrespective of his downsides that mainly revolve around corruption, will continue to exonerate him and make him remain a major factor, a major person, a major character in the building, in the development of a proper democratic culture in this country. The people are proud of him, and we expect that his influence, in that area will not wane in a few years to come, and even beyond that area as well, because of what I just said. And having said that, there are losses and pluses for both parties in that area, but there's something about tradition, there's something about voting pattern that can be very difficult to beat. It might take time, but it can really be very difficult. That's why, if you ask me if another party other than PDP, or maybe a party that tends to the right, will ever win in Rivers, I will ordinarily tell you it's going to be very difficult. It's going to be most impossible, because over time they've always tended to the right, whether PDP, NRC, or so to say. And on a general note, in the South-South as well, that is the voting pattern. They've always been towards the right of the center, whether PDP, whether NRC, or so to say. So it's not going to change this time. Forget all the movement and all the counter movement. It's not going to change really. So at the end of the day, if you ask me in specific terms, in terms of figure, in terms of numbers, I would say yes, no doubt. Yes, we know it's not going to change, but there have been gains on the APC side as well. It might just add to the number of votes that they will get, but it's not going to determine whether or not they will win those areas. So, but if you ask me, I would say, just like I did for Southwest, I would say 60-40, 60 PDP and 40 for APC. Yeah.
Interesting projections. In less than 48 hours, we'll find out how close you were to the call. Many thanks, Dr. Abiodun Adeniyi, Public Affairs Analyst, for joining us on the show this morning. Much appreciated. Well, it's now time for a short break on the morning show. When we return, we'll have Oji Okpi join us with a review of the top stories on today's newspapers. Stay with us.